What is up? My name is Emmett Douglas, and this is Blindside Sports. You can get me on Twitter at EmmettNoC04. And with me today is a very special guest. You can hear him every Tuesday night, along with the great Brian Fenley, which was my first ever interview. You can hear him on Fox Sports Radio. You can hear him doing play calls for different colleges for baseball and basketball. It's Nick Koop. You can get him on Twitter at Koop, but it's not like it's Koop with a K, like Justin Cooper, like Coop, but Koop. NKOOP is his Twitter. Nick, welcome to Blindside Sports.
Thanks, Emmett. Yeah, it's a weird Dutch thing where two O's together, it's pronounced Cope instead of Coop. Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
So for the longest time, before, like, I followed you on Twitter for a couple of years now because of Finley, and for the longest time before I really heard you do a Fox Sports update or heard your play-by-play, I thought you were Nick Koop, not Nick Koop. And I think Chris Plank actually said the same thing too, Fox Sports radio host. So it confuses a lot of people, but hey, man, I guess you got to confuse people, set yourself apart from the other Copes, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. Well, any normal English-speaking person would say Coop. I would too. So for a while, I didn't even correct people as a kid, like in high school. I was just like, whatever. But then at a certain point when I started broadcasting a little bit, I was like, yeah, it's probably a good idea to tell people how to say my name correctly.
Yeah, you're confusing everybody with that. And the way I was trying to do it, and it didn't turn out as smooth as I wanted it to give out your Twitter, was like Justin Cooper, but with a K, but Coop with a K, and I kind of botched that. But why don't we dive into? I was telling you before the show, we're gonna start with Derek Carr, but you're a UCLA guy. You cover the team. You see you know your stuff, and the tournament's coming up. We're less than a week away from Selection Sunday. What are your thoughts for this Bruin team going into the tournament?
Well, I think expectations are pretty high. They've only had 4 losses all season, 2 back in November on a neutral site when they're still breaking in a lot of new pieces. Then it went on a long winning streak, lost a couple games back-to-back on the road to Arizona and USC, who are going to be tournament teams. So they've been great this year. I think their record's 27-4 now at the end of the regular season, and they really seem to be hitting their stride. They had the big win against Arizona on Saturday, but kind of the bittersweet moment was that Jalen Clark, their stud defensive player who does so much for them. He's a guy that can steal the ball and help them initiate and transition. He's their best on-ball defender. He's only 6'5", but he's strong and he's bouncy, so he can play all 5 positions. He gives them lineup flexibility. And then offensively, his 3-point shot has come along. He crashes the offensive boards. So we don't know the result of his MRI, but it looked like he injured his Achilles on Saturday. He was grabbing at it, and my colleagues, Tracy Murray and Josh Lewin, who call the games, they're right there courtside. They saw him mouth, "It popped," and they said that on the broadcast. So if you know anything about Achilles, that's not good. He came back out on a walking boot. So Saturday was weird because you had this real emotional moment of senior night with guys like Tiger Campbell, Jaime Jaquez, David Singleton that have really helped build this program.
Oh yeah, Jaquez has been there in the tournament for years now.
Scale.
He's been Jaime Jaquez is all over the place in the tournament.
Yeah, so you had all of that going on. You had a great game against Arizona where you're playing well, but in the middle of it, this key piece that you've been counting on to have for this upcoming run of the NCAA tournament is potentially not going to have him. I still think UCLA has depth. The question is, can these young guys play a little bit older? They've got the athleticism, I think, to continue playing the type of defense they have, which is a top 3 level defense in the country. But can they keep that going? We'll have to wait and see.
Yes, it's a very, very, interesting time of the year because with this tournament, you never know what's going to happen. I mean, a couple years ago, and it's happened before too, is the Loyola Chicago teams, or they're just who? Like that's the way what you think when you think of a team like that, and then they upset somebody. So this tournament's going to be a very interesting time, and I'm more of a casual college basketball guy. You and Fenley are fanatics, so I pay attention to it, but you guys definitely know a lot more than me. And this tournament, I think there's going to be a lot of storylines here. I think this is kind of the most buzz I've heard about Selection Sunday in a while, Nick. I don't know. I've heard people kind of juice up about it lately. It's weird. I didn't really see the hype. Like, people were not really hyping it up. And over the weekend, man, I started to hear it.
Yeah, I think A, people are excited, but B, it does feel like this tournament is wide open. There's not a real dominant team. You know, you don't have a Kentucky from 10 years ago with Anthony Davis, where
Nope.
they were clearly the number one team all year. You don't have anything close to that. I mean, Houston's kind of been the number one team, and they're a really good defensive team, but their games aren't on TV a ton, so people haven't really seen them. You know, Purdue was hot, but then they've kind of dipped down a little bit. They're very young at the guard position, which becomes so important in the tournament when the game slows down. That's why I think UCLA has had success, because they got a guy like Tiger Campbell running the point. And Alabama, they're obviously going through some stuff off the court right now. But they're a deadly outside shooting team. They're very much an analytically driven team where they take a lot of threes. They try to get inside, but they're kind of like your modern NBA team where they don't take a lot of mid-range jumpers. So right at the top, all those teams, they're good, but they don't stand out. And I think UCLA would have had a really good shot, and I think they still do with the injury to Jalen Clark. But they're kind of like all the other top teams now, where you can point to something that is a potential weakness.
Yeah, and that's the thing with you always find a weakness. The more games you play, the more weaknesses teams find. Obviously, that's just sports in game planning and all that. Emmett Douglas, Nick Koop at NKOOP on Twitter. Koop with a K. That's how you spell it. There we go. We did it. Check him out tomorrow at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on AM 570 LA Sports, along with Brian Finley and Tracy Murray doing the Bruin Insider Show. They'll be getting you ready for Selection Sunday, and they'll be talking Bruins. So there you go. You got to tune that in. Nick, you're a Niners guy, but you work in sports, and we're both NFL fans. So Derek Carr went to the Saints this morning, and you broke that news in your update on Fox Sports Radio for Cowherd, I believe it was. What is your what are your expectations for the Saints? Because this one, I mean, for me, it's just like at this point, he's the best quarterback in that really, really crummy division. So what do you think about it?
Yeah, I thought that was a good landing spot for him. It's funny. I thought I was working the overnight with Bernie Fratto Saturday to Sunday over the weekend, and we didn't talk a lot about the Saints. I actually brought up the Panthers, but for a lot of the same reasons we're liking him with the Saints, because they have a good defense. They're in a division where he's clearly the best quarterback now. And so I think it's a great landing spot for Derek Carr. The Saints and Carr work together to make the cap hit less so early on, so that they can build a solid team around him. So it's a little more backloaded. So, I think that shows that Carr, he really wants to win and wanted to be in a good situation. And so it feels like he identified that New Orleans was that best situation. The reports were that this is really where he wanted to go all along, and that the Saints were inquiring with the Raiders before he was released about trying to trade for him. And so once the Raiders just decided to release him, and whatever deal didn't get worked out, then apparently the Saints were the top team for Carr. He met with everybody, really took his time, but he ultimately had New Orleans circled from the beginning. They worked out a good deal. He keeps his no trade clause. I think in total there's $100 million guaranteed. You never know if
160
those numbers are
$100 million guaranteed.
Yep, yeah, $100 million guaranteed. So I think it's a really nice landing spot for him. I think Dennis Allen's a solid coach, and you're in a division where if you win 9-10 games, that might be enough.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And Dennis Allen and him, they have experience. They know each other. They've worked with each other before, so that's definitely a plus. And the Saints, they were projected. People were saying, I believe it was Broussard was one of them that comes to mind for sure, and maybe somebody on ESPN. I'm blanking who it was, but people were saying the Saints were going to be a playoff team. The Saints could make the NFC Championship last year, and obviously that didn't happen. I think the Saints kind of realized they have a pretty good roster. There's just a bunch of random stuff that's in the way of, them competing. Like Jameis Winston wasn't really doing his thing last year. Dennis Allen had a couple just terrible coaching calls. Kamara, he wasn't particularly good for some games, and obviously have Michael Thomas who can't stay healthy. So at this point, I think the Saints, if you're thinking smart, the Saints you got to go for a receiver in the draft, man. You really do, or you got to sign somebody to pair along with Derek Carr. And you were going.
They got Olave, right?
Oh yeah, Olave, but he's battled some injuries too.
Yeah.
That dude got hit up last year, Nick. I mean, Olave was getting abused. But you were saying earlier how you were talking to Bernie about this the other night. The teams he is going to, like the Panthers, the Jets, all that.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I thought the Buccaneers could be an option for him, because you go there and you immediately team up with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So I think that was kind of a close second for me. Derek Carr as a Jet. We'll get to Aaron Rodgers in a minute, but Derek Carr as a Jet just didn't seem right to me. I just didn't think it was the right fit. That New York media and Derek Carr, I don't think would have a good relationship, because
you always talk about, is this person a New York guy? And Derek Carr never seemed like that guy.
No, Derek Carr just seems like the chill dude who's gonna come in, get his job done, and go home. I mean, that's what Derek Carr is. So I like the signing at this point. I mean, free agency hasn't even started. The draft doesn't happen, but the Saints are early favorites for that division title next year, I think.
Oh, 100%. Quarterback play is obviously so important. And just to kind of relate it to the team I grew up rooting for in the 49ers, you saw just solid quarterback play with them with Brock Purdy, how far that got them when they had the pieces around. So
even Jimmy G was solid quarterback play too. I mean, he wasn't great, but he wasn't bad. And that's kind of the same thing with Brock Purdy. If you have the right coaches and you have the right talent around you, you don't need like a superstar. I mean, I'm a Seahawks guy. Look at Geno. I mean, talk about a career revival. Now, I mean, they're thinking about not even franchise tagging him. How about that? But well, I was telling Dan about this the other day, because Dan's a Seahawks fan, and we were saying how he was saying we draft a quarterback. I'm like, if you're going to draft a quarterback, you keep Geno and you let the quarterback develop behind Geno, and you're doing it now because we don't know how long Pete Carroll's going to coach. I mean, Pete Carroll is getting a little bit up there in age, so I think the window kind of needs to open now if you want to draft a quarterback for Seattle. But yeah, solid quarterback play is, I mean, if you have the right system and the right team, like you said, it can take you a long way.
Yeah. So just, again, the rest of that division, it's like, you don't know what they're doing.
No.
Is Atlanta really going to roll out Desmond Ridder? Yeah. Who's going to start for the Bucks? I think Desmond Ridder is fine. I watched some of his games in college. Like he was a really good college quarterback. I mean, I know it was only his first year, but yeah, Derek Carr immediately becomes the best quarterback and then some.
Yeah, it's not even close.
Yeah, and so I think I agree with what you said though. They have a solid defense. Get him at least another weapon in the draft. Maybe they can bring somebody else in free agency, and then you're cooking. And then the Saints are right back near the top of the NFC and competing with the likes of the Niners, the Eagles, the Cowboys, and so on.
Yeah, and the thing is with the NFC is there's not a lot going on there. I mean, the AFC is definitely the more stacked kind of conference. I mean, the Eagles.
It all comes back to the quarterbacks, right? I mean, the NFC doesn't have great quarterbacks right now.
I mean, the best quarterback in the NFC right now is Jalen Hurts, and you're not really debating anything. I mean, Brady's gone. Rodgers is probably I think Rodgers is better than Hurts at this point, and Rodgers is probably leaving the NFC because I don't see the Packers trading him to an NFC team, and they even said that a couple months ago. So, NFC, it's gonna be the Jalen Hurts show for good quarterbacks. Nick, you've done a lot of broadcasting in your career. You've been all over the place from northern to southern California, and I believe you worked at Harvard or something like that. Like you've done a lot. Take us to where you are. Like explain to us how you got to this point now, working with Fox, working with Brian Fenley and the Bruin Talk crew, and your play-by-play. Explain who helped you, if anybody helped you, to be where you are now.
Well, I worked at Harvard. I went to school back east at Boston University. And so at some point in high school, I made the decision, or I had this thought that I would get into sports journalism. That would be my thing. So when I got to school, I went, you have all of those informational meetings for all the various clubs, right? And so I went to the one for the student newspaper, and then I went to the one for the student radio station, and I just kind of jived with the guys at the radio station a little bit more. Like we just clicked right away. And
Yep.
so I was like, okay. So I just kind of took that path, and there were a couple older guys there that I called games with, and they were, juniors and seniors, and they were good. They knew that, they knew what they were doing. One guy I still really keep in touch with who's killing it. His name's Tyler Murray. He works for the, I get confused because they're not in Rhode Island anymore. The AAA of the Red Sox. They're in Worcester
Oh,
now.
wow.
They're calling the Woo Sox. But they Pawtucket. That's where they were. But and if in broadcasting, that job at Pawtucket and now in Worcester, that's like the most direct path to the big leagues. Like so many big league broadcasters worked at that affiliate. I don't know how it became that way. It just has been. Like Will Fleming, who calls the Red Sox games, like he was there. I mean, there's a whole list. Anyway, so Tyler's got that job now. He does hockey on Nesson, calling games like BU, big hockey school, BU, BC, all those Northeast schools. So he's a guy that kind of took me under his wing a little bit and helped me get my feet wet. And so he's killing it. And then got some work. Yeah, just all the schools around there. That's kind of the cool thing about Boston is there are so many colleges in a small area. You can go BU, Harvard, BC, Northeastern. All these Division I programs are only separated by a few miles. So as a broadcaster, you've got tons of job opportunities.
Oh,
And
yeah.
all these schools have tons of Olympic sports. They like to stream them all. So, and then Harvard's got like everything under the sun. So, I mean, I did field hockey and lacrosse. I did rugby. I did swim meets, there, water polo, anything I could
Wow.
do, I did. So, I even did fencing one time. I'm not sure
Oh,
I came
hey.
across coherent at all. Fortunately, we had a guy who was a former Harvard fencer to provide the analysis. So I just tried to let him have the spotlight and
There
just
you
tried
go.
to compliment him. But I met my now wife at school, and then we relocated to LA because I grew up in Northern California. My in-laws, her parents retired to Palm Springs. So we were like, hey, LA seems like a nice middle ground. We didn't have any, family by us, a couple years after graduating. We're kind of like, okay, let's do something different. We didn't see ourselves in Boston long term for as much as we liked it. So yeah, made it out to LA, just cold contacted like every school in Southern California, just sending emails to various SIDs and head of communications with like, hey, here's my stuff. If you ever need any help, here I am. And another guy I owe something to, his name is John Ramey. He's currently the voice of the Nevada Wolfpack. He was doing the Bruin Talk show before Brian and I started doing it 5 years ago. And so I met John by happenstance, not actually at UCLA, but came to learn that he did like UCLA soccer and baseball and did that Bruin show. And so he needed help filling in. So rather than, have someone at the athletic department figure out a fill in, he knew like he couldn't do a soccer game. And so he would then just tell UCLA, hey, I got this guy, Nick, he knows what he's doing. Like he can fill in. And they're like, great. So that's how I first got into UCLA, was because of John. And then John got that job with Nevada a few years ago. So I started picking up doing the soccer games. Brian and I started doing the Bruin show. And then that just sort of kind of dovetailed from there and got to do the baseball games. John had a partner who was still doing it, and then he stopped doing them at the beginning of last year. So it's just kind of branched out from there. So, but I owe John Ramey a lot just for getting me into UCLA in the first place. It's been a great spot.
How did you meet Brian Finley?
So he was doing the Bruins show first. So after John left, he was doing it for a year, and then they wanted to bring on a second person, and so just because I had done Olympic sports and stuff, then my name got brought up. And then I met Brian and just started doing the show together. Basically, it was, we met, got along, worked out. So we started doing the Bruins show. Brian got in with Fox, and then, Brian was gracious enough. He heard that they had an opening for an update anchor. This would have been last summer now. And so he kind of put my name in Dan's ear. And then I reached out to Dan. I was just like, hey, I had touched base with Dan already. And just to sort of introduce myself, just to stay, on top of mind. And then so I owe Brian as well for for helping me get in at FSR. And I also knew Isaac Lowenkron as well. We had cross. Yeah. Isaac is great. So we had cross paths because he did stuff at Bakersfield. I've also called games UC Riverside in the Big West. So our paths had crossed over the years. And I think I didn't reach out to Isaac, but I think Isaac, I kind of heard my name was brought up, and I think he went to bat for me too. So I appreciate that.
The Lord of Trending, Isaac Lowenkron.
Yeah.
That dude has pulled off some of and Fenley is, obviously great too, but some of the stuff that Lowenkron's pulled off during his reports is epic. I mean, I don't know if you ever listen in your car when you're driving around, but this is last summer, and you remember where they had, I believe it was like a college football thing overseas, and they had the credit card machine broke.
So yes. Yeah. This was the Nebraska Northwestern game. Yes. Yeah. I remember.
Free beer. And then he says after that, I might be going to where were they playing again?
It was in Ireland somewhere.
I might be going to Ireland. I'm Isaac Lowenkron. Mm-hmm. Then he's done a report with a fire alarm in the background and used it to craft something. He's done it all.
He's great too on doing Chargers pre and post.
Yep.
And especially post when he's got the callers coming in. Like, he handles them so well. I'm really impressed with how he handles that call-in show, especially after the bad moments that Chargers fans are upset about.
After the playoff loss. I bet that board off was on the dump button that whole time when the callers were calling. I'd be like, man, that was an embarrassing loss.
Yeah, I caught his post game in the car, and he rode that line, because he is, you still kind of got to be the company guy a little bit, right? But I mean, at the same time, you can't deny what was just a really, really bad way to lose a football game. And he kind of just had this dry, somber tone throughout the whole thing. And then I told him that next Monday, Dan Patrick, they always build these, 1 minute openings where they grab audio from various places to kind of build this thing. And they did it around that Chargers game, and they grabbed audio from Isaac's post game, and it was great. It was so funny. He sounded just so dejected.
I wonder if we can get our hands on that one somehow. That's funny, man. He's got it. I told him he didn't even know about it. And I told him. And then he went, because he also works for the local affiliate AM 570, which is also a Fox Sports Radio. Yeah, Fox Sports Radio affiliate. They have Dan Patrick. So yes, the blowtorch. So he was able to go and grab the audio. So I know he has it. Yeah, that's pretty great, man. I mean, I think I'm sure Dan does know Lowenkron because he's a morning guy. He's always on the mornings, and so if Dan knows the Fox Sports Radio people, he probably. Who doesn't know Lowenkron? I mean, come on. But you've done overnights before, and you've worked a couple shows with the great Ben Maller. And I ask everybody this because people have different opinions of overnight radio and crazy callers. Have you been in there when there's been a really wild call that sticks out, in your those crazy callers that Ben gets?
Yeah, I haven't done it in a little while. The last one I did was actually, here's Ben for you. He did the overnight going into Thanksgiving morning. He did his regular show, and all the rest of us were fill-ins. I think that was the last time I did it. I would say crazy, but there was there was this woman who was just so sweet. She was asking us like what our favorite sports
Rachel
memory
in
was
Montebello?
and wishing us. Might have been.
Yes, it was
I
definitely her. Yep. Yep.
Okay, it was probably her because I would like to do that show more. I always have a blast.
Oh, it's so good. It's the best
It's
overnight show around.
yeah, it's the most unique sports show I've ever heard. Like it is a riot. Like I
Two Pros is
remember the
really
first
funny
time
too.
I did it. Two Pros is fun. I usually catch the last hour of that when I have my morning shifts. I like Two Pros a lot too. They do a great job. But yeah, Maller is the most unique sports show. The first time I did it, I was just like, where did I end up? Where am I? But I mean, it's great.
Oh, you
It's
got to definitely get some more of those shifts in for Eddie there, because there's some crazy stuff. I mean, last night Ben had 2 in studio guests, listeners who come in and to hang out in studio. I don't know if you know the name Jay Scoop, Maller Militia legend.
sounds familiar.
He's the guy who made the
Yeah.
songs and had the medical issues back during the holidays. He almost died. He made it
Okay.
back.
Yeah.
He made it back, and then Mason the Millennial was there for the Rolling Loud, the rap festival this weekend, so he made it in. I mean, Ben, you don't hear a show that has listeners come into the studio and chill with them. I mean, that's unique in its own right there.
100%. No,
And I remember too. I think this might have been the last time you did Eddie's shift. I tried to get you to find a song for Brandon to sing. Brandon Truffaut, the guy, producer.
Oh,
of,
yeah.
for
That
Bernie.
was
We got next time you guys are both in, we got to revisit that one. You gotta get him to do something better than the autumn wind.
Yeah. I think we got the overnight coming up this weekend, so I think we'll have to figure that out.
Bernie, if you're on Friday, I can probably do, because Bernie only takes calls Friday nights, so. But yeah,
I think we'll be
it's pretty good, man. It's pretty. You gotta love the Ben Maller show. So, what are you doing with the Niners, man? Are you sticking with Brock Purdy? You going Trey Lance? I saw something on TikTok that was really ridiculous. Someone said bring Baker Mayfield in for quarterback depth.
No.
I mean, come on.
No.
But what are you doing if you're the Niners? You starting Trey Lance, or you going with Mr. Irrelevant?
Well, we got to see how surgery goes for Mr. Irrelevant this week, because
That's Friday.
hoping it's this. Yeah, it was. Yeah. So speaking of my shift this morning, real quick, initially it was Wednesday, and then an hour later, the reports come out. Oh, actually, it's Friday. There's just constantly these little pushing of backs of this surgery for Brock Purdy, but fingers crossed it's happening on Friday, and then from there is when we really know, though. Like, they think it's the UCL that they need to repair, and it's going to be a 6-month thing, but there's very much a chance that they cut them open, they get in there, and it's a lot more serious, and maybe it's something closer to Tommy John. Ooh. So I think for baseline, just regardless of what happens with Brock's surgery, I think they need to find a veteran, someone like an Andy Dalton type. If Matt Ryan were to be released and come on the market, someone like that who the coaching staff knows they don't have to worry about, and that this guy and whoever it may be would understand that, look, we might, given our track record, we might need you to play for a month, so be ready. But at the same time, like, we need you to be a solid backup for us, because
there you go. Yeah, that's
they've just been going through. So I think they're definitely going to try to find that veteran quarterback they can sign for just a couple million, just to have as their safety valve. And then if Brock's good to go at the start of the season, you roll with Brock. Bottom line. I mean, he was outstanding. We ride the hot hand. Hopefully his rehab goes well, because they were a good team, a very good team with Jimmy Garoppolo, but the margins were sometimes small in games where, you're settling for field goals. And even though the defense is outstanding, you always just felt like things were teetering a little bit. And when Brock Purdy took over the offense, all of a sudden they're scoring 35 plus points a game. And so instead of winning games, 24, no, Tom Brady. Well, Tom Brady's
done, but I don't. Tom Brady. That's what I'm saying. You guys, was it his first?
Oh,
start?
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
It's
yeah, that was the
crazy.
first start. Well, it was like 35-0 in the third
Oh,
quarter.
yeah.
So I mean, they were just able to win games more comfortably. He took that offense to a whole new level. They went from winning games 27-14, 27-17, where it's kind of close in the fourth, and you need that one drive to finish the game, to then they're blowing teams out and winning games by the end of the third quarter. So you got to keep Purdy there. It's a weird dynamic, obviously, with Trey Lance, who wants to play, who got hurt. But it just seems like it seems like Brock was able to facilitate the offense that Kyle really is comfortable running, whereas he definitely was running a different offense and doing different things with Trey Lance, running him a lot more. And I felt like when Lance got hurt, it kind of allowed Kyle Shanahan to go back to what he likes and the kind of offense he likes to run.
Yeah, I mean that does the offense seemed completely different after the Trey Lance injury. So that's a good point by you. And hypothetical here, let's say the surgery goes, as expected, he's out 6 months. He comes back, you guys start him. Are you holding on to Trey Lance? Are you trading him at the deadline? What would you do with that?
That's the tough thing, because how tradable is Trey Lance if he can't play the field? You know what? You're not going to be able to get much for him if teams don't really get a sense of what he can do. I think you just got him. I don't know that you necessarily have to just get rid of him and deal him. I think potentially you've got Brock Purdy and you got Trey Lance. And hey, if Brock Purdy might get hurt again. I mean, you look at these last few years. I mean, Trey Lance got banged up at the end of the 2021 season when he was filling in for Jimmy Garoppolo, who was getting hurt. Jimmy Garoppolo had a season where he got hurt in game number 2, and he had guys like Nick Mullins and C.J.
Oh yeah,
Beathard
there was
playing.
like a 2-year streak. He couldn't stay healthy. Jimmy G, he was out. He
Yeah.
missed a couple whole seasons.
So this has been a constant thing for the 49ers under Kyle Shanahan. For whatever reason, they have just not had sustained health at the quarterback spot. So I don't think it's as simple as, okay, Brock Purdy, the elbow surgery went well, he's back, we're good, and we don't need Trey Lance anymore. I think you got to keep him there, continue to develop him, because you never know what might happen.
Yeah, and that's a good point, and that's the Niners are very, very lucky with their quarterback situation. I'd even bring up Jimmy G because John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan aren't too happy with him. He's not coming back. That's just the bottom line of it. Like you said, they're probably gonna end up bringing in another guy like Andy Dalton or a veteran type, or somebody who can place solid backup reps for just in case something does happen, because the Niners' luck, man, with their quarterbacks, anything could happen. I mean, it's what's you guys' quarterback situation was weird. I mean, you guys you lost all 3 of your quarterbacks. I'm talking NFC Championship, and then you guys had the great Joshua Johnson, who was he's been in the league for so long as a backup. I didn't even know who he was until he came in to play a quarterback against the Eagles. So definitely the Niners have a lot of interesting decisions to be made coming up here. And a lot of it depends on Brock Purdy's surgery Friday. So hopefully that goes well here. Emmett Douglas, get me on Twitter at EmmettNoC04. Nick Koop, get him on Twitter at NKOOP, Koop with a K, but it's pronounced Koop. So Nick, you've worked at Fox Sports Radio in the newsroom for 6 months now, I believe, since last summer. And you've done the mornings, you've done most shifts. What is the craziest story that's you've had to break the news of on air?
Oh, that's a good question. It's recency bias. This is kind of not fully answering your question because I didn't break it on there, but the kid from Alabama last week.
Yes,
I'm totally blanking on his name right
something?
now. Brandon. No, the basketball player.
Oh, Brandon Miller?
I'm totally blank. Yeah, Brandon Miller. Thank you very much.
Yeah. We were both blanking on it right there. I was like,
I was Yeah, so the story was just kind of trickling in the morning, and I was reporting on it. But then, when my shift ends there at midday is when Doug Gottlieb goes, and Gottlieb's also, obviously college basketball guy. So I was talking
Yep.
to producer Jason Stewart and then Dan Byer as well, and I was like, "Hey guys, like, there's a story. It's starting to gain. I think it's going to be a big story here in the next day or two, and so you guys might want to, be ready for this. I think Doug's going to want to talk." And then, I left for the day, but then I come back the next day and I hear that most of Doug's show was talking about this, and
Yes.
so that's a recent thing. I think about I've thought about. Yeah, nothing. I wouldn't say anything too crazy. There's always NFL stuff, coaching hires
Yep.
and whatnot. Um, but nothing too dramatic that I can think of. There was a funny time actually. I was doing the Saturday Sunday overnight on Bernie's show, and there was Stanford, Oregon State, and it was like they're playing at Stanford. It was like the last game of the night. It went down to the wire, and it was right. Oh, now how am I remembering? No, I'm sorry. That was a crazy game. It was actually the very end of the year. Excuse me, Stanford BYU, and it was like midnight Pacific. The East Coast is asleep when David Shaw announces his retirement as the head coach
Yeah.
at Stanford. And I remember,
I
like,
think I was
I,
listening live
I
that night when
saw
you were
that.
there.
Yeah. Yeah. So that game finished at 11:30 Pacific. I don't think it started until 8 Pacific. So, like,
Probably
the whole
7:38.
college
It's usually when
football
Pac-12
world.
starts.
Yeah. 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 So the whole college football world is asleep. And it seems so David Shaw, he's just decides his post game
Yeah.
presser at midnight. He's going to say he's going to
Yeah, we're
retire. But I
done. We're
remember
done here.
yeah. But I remember I was like, guys, I got some break. Like, I come in, Bernie's like, what is breaking at midnight? Like, what could this possibly be? And then, so those are
uh,
just a couple of little things that come to mind.
One of a couple crazy ones I can think of too, and the first one might be recency bias, was the great Steve DeSager during the DeMar Hamlin
Mm-hmm.
update, or when that happened
Yeah.
at the start of the year. You could tell Steve, like, that touched DeSager. Like, DeSager, he sounded like DeSager sounded visibly scared. Like, he was. I mean, we all were in that situation.
That
He
was
was
scary.
he was still keeping the very professional Steve DeSager was still keeping all his thoughts together, getting everything out in the professional manner. But the other one was, I remember where I was when this one happened, was I was probably in this exact chair that I'm sitting in recording, talking to you, listen to Dan Byer and Aaron Torres on the Sunday show. Usually George Rice was in that spot, but it was Torres, and it was Selection Sunday last year. And you know where I'm going with this. And then Ralph Irvin, who I think you replaced, came out on the mic. We have breaking news. Tom Brady's back. That one was, I couldn't imagine breaking that on air. And I don't know if you know Ralph, but Ralph was calling that was BS from the start of it back last year. Ralph was not buying the Brady retirement. So Ralph kind of got his victory lap on the air, and it broke during Selection Sunday. I don't know. I said this on my show last year.
Yep.
Selection Sunday, Brady just wanted to say F you to all the college basketball, fans and to the
so
NCAA.
rude.
Right? I was like, come on, the one day that they have where everyone's hyped, you come out of retirement that day, literally maybe 5 minutes after the Selection Sunday completed. I mean, it was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So Emmett
that would be fun to get to break that. Just be like, guys, you have no idea what I'm about to tell you right now.
Yeah.
Tom Brady,
Oh, that one I want to break. Or this happened with the MLB, like the Arson Judge. That one would be funny to break when John Heyman had the typo and then the wrong team. Yep. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff that that happens. That people get their hands on, and then turns out nope, complete opposite. You're a Kings fan, correct? One of the only Kings fans I know.
Yeah, long. We're out there. Hey, if you ever make it to Sacramento, they're everywhere. Although a lot of Bay Area people have moved to Sacramento, so the Warriors fans, they're also up there too.
Yeah. So the Kings are on a hot streak. How you feeling confident about the Kings at all, or you just think something's gonna happen in the playoffs? How you like that? I mean, the Kings haven't been good in ages, man.
I'll be dating myself a little bit. You can maybe put together, but I was in 8th grade the last time the Kings made the playoffs. And I'm 30
Wow.
years old now. So that's how, I mean, honestly, it's been, I don't want to sound like a bad fan, but like it's just been so hard to be a fan, not just because they're bad, but you had the ownership of the Maloofs who just were clearly didn't want anything to do with the team and they were ready to sell to the highest bidder, whether that person wanted to keep them in Sacramento or not. I don't know if you remember, Steve Ballmer originally wanted to buy them and move them to Seattle.
Oh yeah,
Um,
that was what 2013
and then
around there.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That was 2013 in there. There was this whole moment where the whole fan base thought it was imminent, and there was this last regular season game where I mean the local broadcasters were crying at the end of the game, kind of holding back tears because they thought that was it. Until Vivek Ranadive came in, and he's kind of been the opposite. He's been like so gung ho and so enthusiastic. He's gotten better, but initially in his ownership I think it was involved too much, and the team still continued to struggle, cycling through coaches. So I'm glad that they were finally able to, ownership has settled in. They got the new arena, helping to keep the team. So I'm happy for the hometown from that standpoint. And now the wins have kind of fun. Love Mike Brown. I think I wasn't sure the Kings could land a coach like that, and so I'm impressed that they were able to land him. And this whole, given where they've been, this whole season is just gravy, like there's nothing to complain about. they've
No,
been they've been the lowest of
which is
low
weird for you
for
guys.
17 years
Not
now.
used to that. There's always something to complain about being a
Yeah.
Kings fan. This is the first time in, like you said, 17 years. Everything's starting to go right for the Kings. And I mean, when you guys traded Halliburton last year, I was like,
Yeah,
oh,
shocking.
wow. Yeah. And I mean, well, I was calling them the idiot. And I mean, I think the Kings won that deal with a Domantas Sabonis. So
Yeah, it's worked out.
I think the Kings are gonna. The thing is with the West is so like wide open. I mean, I just don't buy the Denver Nuggets to win to be like that top team in the West. Like I think Steph and Clay, they're gonna continue to keep getting hotter and hotter. And you got KD out looking really good as a Sun. So if he doesn't get injured, like the playoffs are actually going to be really interesting to see this year. Same with the East. I mean, the East is, I mean, you got the teams like the Celtics, the Bucks, and the Knicks, and all those teams. So I'm really interested.
Are playing really well,
but playoff Harden. You got to remember playoff Harden. That's the one question mark. I thought he broke out of his playoff Harden last year for a second, and then what would you know? It comes back, and then the Heat are kind of inconsistent in my opinion for the East. I don't think they're too consistent. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the NBA.
Yeah, they'll be a tough out, but I don't think they're a true contender, but they'll be a tough out.
For sure. It's about to be 3:00 here quickly. So one more question. What is your favorite Brian Fenley moment? Brian Fenley, he's done a lot of very funny or interesting reports over the years, or, probably on the Bruin Insider show, he's done some interesting things. What's the funniest Fenley moment?
The funniest Fenley moment. He is so good at just like weaving things together. He's got a way to like wrap an interview where he takes what that person said and kind of like turn it and segue out. He's the segue master. If, when he's doing an update and Jonas tosses to him, Brian can utilize what they were just talking about. He is the segue guy. And so I appreciate that about him big time. I'm always amused and excited to see what he can come up with for a segue, because his mind is always churning to put them together. And he's successful. He's very successful in doing so.
He also has some great drops like, hey, or the daddy drop. You got the daddy drop. Shout out Ty-Shirt for creating all those drops. And the joke on well, I don't think it's a joke. Actually, I'm pretty sure it isn't a joke, but they roll with it on the Jason Smith show is Finley's mom in the magazines. If you know what I'm talking about, the adult magazines, and that's all. And he always goes with it. I'm like, this guy's a professional, and obviously the favorite Fenley moments. I don't know. You work morning, so you're probably not up when he fills in for Eddie. But when the back and forth between him and Ben Maller is always just top tier entertainment.
Is he combative with Ben?
Oh, him
generally?
and Ben. Yeah, you gotta ask him about it. Him and Ben, if you even look at their Twitter interactions, like it's just Ben, makes fun of him for having a 34-minute long updates, and I'm sure you get tagged in stuff on Twitter all the time about Finley. So I mean, Ben will they'll start roasting each other, and Ben will Brian, like you said, with the segues, or he'll be like, speaking of, like, Ben will talk about something, it'll be like, let's say like, I don't know, like the John or something. He'll make like a toilet reference, be like, yeah, a lot about sitting on the John or something like that. You know how Fenley is.
Just any little dig they can get in at each other.
Oh yeah, it's great. I mean, now I think kind of since Fenley's not doing it, the new kind of victim of it is Kevin Wire. But we'll just leave it that Kevin does it to himself. All right. he made a mistake, and I'm not gonna blame Kevin here, because I think he was kind of caught up in the moment of working with a guy he knew of, and he said, "I'm a big Ben Maller show fan." And then this is the first time he filled in. I think it was when Eddie got really sick over the holidays, and Ben and Koop and Blind Scott, one of the callers, were testing him. And he couldn't name a lot. He didn't know much about the show. It was and you could tell him like, Kevin, you don't realize what you just did here, bro. The militia is gonna love this field day. So he hasn't lived that one down in the 4 months he's worked there.
I came in as a total noob to the Ben Maller show the first time I filled in, and I was so he's got the little reads coming back from break he has us do, and I was just so focused on, I don't know, just there's this, there's that, and I'm just like trying to read this, and because it's just different than any other show for us, and until you do it, it's felt a little foreign, and I mispronounced his last name at the top of the show, and I didn't even realize I did it. It was totally like I didn't even know I did it. I was just like I was so locked in, and I called him Mahler, and then it was just like, I had no idea. I just totally goofed, and I knew it was Maller. I'd heard it at that point, but for some reason, I just screwed it up there. Of course, the very first time I did that read, I screwed it up. But I think Ben Mahler sounds pretty cool, though, for what it's worth.
Do you know Dave Softy Mahler?
Yeah, up in Seattle.
Yep,
yeah,
right,
he does stuff with the Huskies.
From you. Yep. That one I always like. I was like,
maybe I had him in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
Maybe something happened there.
Yeah, and there is a difference, like the spelling of Mahler and Maller. There is a difference, but it's a very, very similar name, and that's probably where you got that from. Nick, it's been fun, man. Really, really enjoyed having you on.
Likewise.
I might have to get you and Finley on if the Bruins, do something in the NCAA tournament, and you guys make it to the Final Four. I might have to have you and Brian Finley come drop some knowledge on the people about UCLA. But Nick, thanks for jumping on.
100%.
You have anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
No, just check out Fox Sports Radio. We're all there. We're all having fun. Appreciate your support, Emmett, and thanks for having me.
No problem, man. Go, like I said, check out the Bruin Insider Show tomorrow. You got any play calling coming up people can keep their ears out for?
I got UCLA baseball. I'll be doing all their home games. Got a game tomorrow as well against Long Beach State, and all their home games the rest of the year. They should be pretty good, and definitely one of the best teams on the West Coast. Should be in the mix to go to the NCAA tournament, and then who knows from there what they can accomplish.
There we go. You heard it here. Nick Koop joining me on Blindside Sports. Make sure to leave a like on this episode. I will be posting clips later of this conversation, so I'll put the socials in the comment section or in the description. If you guys enjoyed, leave a like, comment, turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss whenever Blindside Sports goes live. Thanks for watching. See ya.